Netanyahu doesn't really need much introductions, so just a bit about the book and how I went about writing. When I started working on the book about 3 years ago, really the biggest challenge was how to take what has been a very intensive, and by this time already, a very long public career and also personal life, and packaging it into a manageable size. This is about 400 pages, is what the size that most publishers want to publish, nothing larger than that. And the solution I finally came up with after quite a few false starts was to write Netanyahu's life as a history of Israel. Netanyahu was born about 16 months after the birth of Israel, so his life has run parallel to Israel's history for the last 69 years of Bibi's life and 70 years of Israel's existence. Netanyahu, from the age of 18, from 1967, was almost the whole time in public service, first as a soldier, then as an officer. For a short while he was a student and worked a bit in the private sector, but then he entered the diplomatic corps as a deputy ambassador in Washington, ambassador to the UN, and then he immediately moved into politics. He's been in politics now for 30 years. So to put that into one package, I thought that the best frame was to tell the story of Israel through the lives of the Netanyahu family and Bibi himself. Now, there have been so many books written about Israel. Yesterday I was doing an event in a bookshop, and I was looking around, and I lost count after about 60, 70 books there. There was really so many books about history of Israel, the conflict, Israel's place in the Middle East, Israel and the Jews, Israel and the Arabs and the Palestinians. What hasn't been written, at least not for a wider audience, it's been written a bit in academia, has been the story of Israel through the eyes of the group or the ideological stream party which is today in power in Israel. So almost all the books about Israel tend to be written from the perspective of the founding generation, David Ben-Gurion, Golda Meir, Moshe Dayan, that lot. Now it makes sense because they were the founding generation, they built the state, they were the mainstream of the Zionist movement before the foundation of Israel. But Likud and Likud's ideological fathers, Cherut Party, before that the Revisionist Party, were always a part of Zionism, were always a part of the State of Israel, and have obviously been in power now for about 3 decades, with a few very short intervals. And we don't tend to look at Israel, we always tend to see them as an aberration, as like Israel's gone off course, Israel is now in an atypical period, and sooner or later Israel will go back to what it should have always been and what it was, the state of the Ben-Gurion, the successors afterwards, the generation of Peres and Rabin, and we're just waiting for the next generation of Labour Zionist leaders to come along, and they'll put Israel back where it should be. And obviously that's a fallacy. Obviously Israel is a democracy, and it has different competing political parties and ideologies, and for the last 3 or 4 decades, most of the time it's been the group represented by Netanyahu. So when I set out to write the book, that was very much part of the way I wanted the book to read, as a story of how this ideological stream, which were the underdogs of Zionism, Jabotinsky, the founding father of the ideology which is today the Likud party, was always the outsider. He even at some point set up an alternative Zionist movement which existed from outside the Zionist establishment. It was Ben-Gurion's biggest rival. Jabotinsky died in 1940, so there was a sort of a crisis of leadership, which Menachem Begin emerged eventually as the new leader of Likud. And in many ways, Netanyahu is the 3rd generation of revisionist leaders. Obviously, there were a few other leaders. There was Shamir, who was sort of a caretaker after Begin. Ariel Sharon, who usurped Bibi as leader for a period, but Sharon was never a revisionist. Sharon was actually a Labour Zionist who kind of went to the right and joined Likud. Then he almost destroyed Likud when he split it and set up Kadima. So Netanyahu, in many ways, is the 3rd big leader of this movement. And we took the Labour movement. The Israeli Labour Party has had 7 leaders in the last 19 years. Likud or Cherut or Revisionism has really had only 3 big leaders in nearly a century of its existence. So it's it may sound strange to say that about Likud. Likud is a very stable movement in the fact that it's been very loyal to its leaders. Jabotinsky, the founder, then Begin, now Bibi. And I think that's a very useful way to look at Israel. And I write there in the introduction that to understand Israel today, you have to understand Netanyahu, and vice versa. And the other thing that people tend to say about about Netanyahu, is that he's half American. He's not really authentically an Israeli. There's something foreign about him. He's almost a transplant made in the USA and grafted onto the Israeli body politic. And that's also, I think, and I try to prove that in the book, a bit of an illusion, because Netanyahu was educated in the US, spent most of his teenage years, and then in his 20s and 30s, he was there as a student and a diplomat. But what Netanyahu brought from the US were largely his presentational skills, his art of television, his appearance, the fancy Xenia suits. But beneath the suit, beneath that polished exterior and the very fluent American English delivery, he is an Israeli ideologue. He's a Jewish nationalist, and these are very, very deep parts of his personality, of what motivates him as a politician. There are obviously American influences, but I think, and I hope that those that you read the book will see that he's not half American. He's Israeli through and through. And like I said, to understand Israel today and the way Israel makes Israel tick today is very much understanding what Netanyahu is and how he became who he is today.